Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
And more spirit takes over coming past the wire. It will be more spirit to win the Los Alamitos Futurity by a length and a half.
This is just an unbelievable day for Bob Baffert and Mike Smith. They are unstoppable. More Spirit has dominated the Met Mile. He won it by 7 lengths. Horses have reached the starting gate. It's post time. Cold Front, the favorite, comes forward. And they're into the stretch. Cold Front put to the 10. Cold Front does it again. Firing the field of the Amsterdam.
Okay, everybody, we are back on Past the Wire TV with Raymond DeStefano, and we're going to talk about what was at one time, and I say that because I don't know, arguably, I think we could say there have been many races of the century, but at one time there was a race of the century that was without a doubt the race of the century and was known as such. And Ray experienced it, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, Ray. So thanks for coming on, and we're going to talk about what was then. And I don't know if we could still say now. I guess that's debatable, but there's a case to be made. The race of the century.
You know, a lot of places where you read the race of the century, this is the race that comes up. So. This is the race of the century. September 27th, 19, is it up? No, 19.
It's up, right?
1967. You had Buckpasser, who was the champion, he was the horse of the year in 1966. Damascus, who would become horse of the year this year in 1967. And Dr. Fager, who would put together the greatest year of racing any horse ever had to become horse of the year in 1968. So it's the only time that 3 horse of the years, you know, competed together. And there's Baez's signature on top. And then you also had the, you know, head of R, which we'll get into. Great Power, who was supposed to be a rabbit for Buckpasser. He got outrun the whole way. And then the Giant Killer, you know, Alan Jerkins with Handsome Boy, but was not going to kill any of those giants that day. That's the program from that day. Still have it.
Now that's when the Woodward was a major race, which you and I both remember, and was run at Aqueduct. Right. Right, not at Belmont, and last year they actually ran it at Saratoga, and now they moved it back to Belmont. But it was an Aqueduct benchmark, for lack of a better term, for a long time.
50-something thousand people at Aqueduct that day, and you know, I went to take. I had one of the old Bell and Howell 8mm cameras. I went to take a movie of the race. But I'll explain in a few minutes why I didn't get to take that movie. You know, I loved Buckpasser. I told you, he was the first horse I snuck in the spring of '85. Met Eddie Nealoy. Used to go visit Buckpasser in the spring of '66, right after his champion 2-year-old race, and when he was starting his 3-year-old career. I loved Dr. Fager, and again, I could say, arguably. In my opinion, I'll put it double negative. I cannot say that he was not the best horse I ever saw. You know, and I throw Ruffian in there, and I throw Seattle Slew in there. And so close. Not Seattle Slew, Secretariat. And Seattle Slew so close. You know, he didn't make the top 3, but boy, God forgive me, maybe he should. But,
you know, and many people say, many knowledgeable people, and when I say many people, I don't mean casual people who I don't think really know, but many people who I think you and I would agree are knowledgeable and students of the game have the opinion that Dr. Fager was the fastest of them all, the fastest racehorse ever.
And he won, you know, at a distance too. But yeah, raw speed, and I in '67, you know, I would go down to Nehru's barn, Mr. Nehru, barn 39 after I was finished, and I told you last week he let me see Dr. Fager, and then whenever I used to go, I'd see Joe Dmitrievic, his assistant trainer, would let me go see Dr. Fager. And then eventually I just went to see Dr. Fager one-on-one, like with Secretariat in the van after his last race in Canada. Damascus to me was the nemesis of Dr. Fager. I love Dr. Fager, and Damascus, he was trained by Frank Whiteley, who was a great trainer, but he wasn't a warm and fuzzy guy. And I knew at an early age, you don't go ask Frank Whiteley if you can see Damascus. You know, with that cigarette hanging out of his mouth, he would have told you where to go. You know, he wasn't a friendly guy, nor was David, but they were great trainers. And so I never got really a personal relationship. So it was always my two favorite horses at the time, Dr. Fager and Damascus, and Dr. Fager and Buckpasser were teaming up with Damascus in the race of the century. Now, Damascus ran twice with a head of her. First time they ran, Dr. Fager beat Damascus in the Gotham, I believe, in '66. Oh, no, '67. And then they ran in the Woodward in the September. And then they ran twice after that, the next year in the Suburban. And Dr. Fager won because Hedevar came up a little lame that morning. Whiteley scratched him. Damascus ran without his rabbit, and he lost. And then the next and last time they ran was in the '68 Brooklyn. And Hedevar was okay. He ran, he did his job, and Damascus won. So Dr. Fager and Damascus ran 4 times. 2 times Dr. Fager beat Damascus, and that was without Hedevar the rabbit. And 2 times Damascus beat Dr. Fager, that was with Hedevar the rabbit. And I don't think Dr. Damascus would have ever beat Hedevar, I don't think Damascus would have ever beat Dr. Fager without Hedevar. I think it would have been 4-0. You know, I mean, that's horse racing, but I'll never think that Damascus was a better horse, even though he got Horse of the Year in 1967. I put an asterisk, you know, next to that. Dr. Fager couldn't be rated. Everybody knew that. So they send a rabbit and he's going to go. You know, suicidal fractions. But, you know, this was the showdown. But with Hedevar in there, it kind of lost a little of its excitement. But it was still very, very well advertised, and it was the horse raceman's, you know, horse racing fans' dream. You know, there's Buckpasser, who, you know, came back and had a good 4-year-old career, and the 2 top 3-year-olds by far, Damascus and Dr. Fager. So I went with my Bell and Howell 8mm to take movies of the race, and I knew Mike Sirico, who was the track photographer at the time, who happens to be, or he's passed away now, happened to be Bob Coglianice's uncle, who he took over the photography, and now Adam. And he befriended me. I was a kid. He used to give me pictures, and if I wanted a wind circle picture, he felt bad charging me. He charged me a couple of bucks or give it to me for nothing. And I was in the tunnel that day before the race, and he was there talking to a man, and he called me over and he said, "Raymond, this is Tony Triolo, the Sports Illustrated photographer." And I never heard of him before. I found out later that I think his forte was boxing. He did a lot of big boxing matches and horse racing. He said he'd like to know if you want to work for him for that race, the big race. I said, "Do what?" So he's a photographer. He couldn't be in 2 places at one time. He wanted to set the camera up at the top of the stretch where the horses were turning for home, and he wanted to be at the finish line. Couldn't do it. He couldn't outrun the horses. So he asked me, and I'll show you. Well, actually, he asked me if I would like to go to the top of the stretch. He would set up the camera, and I think I sent you the pictures. Maybe you'll put it up when we put this up. He would set up the camera, and he said, when the horses get to this point, push the button down, and when they get to this point, stop clicking. It was just an automatic. I don't know, in seconds, it must have taken 10 pictures. And this was the picture that, quote unquote, I took. You know, so he gave me $100, which as a kid, what a tremendous amount of money, you know, and they sent me, Sports Illustrated sent me, I don't know if you can see that.
I can.
That's the picture that I took of Dr. Fager and Damascus, who came from second to last, you know, took the lead there because Dr. Fager was cooked. He finished third, and Buckpasser finished second. Here's the finish that he took. They sent me this picture too. You know, anticlimactic, but you know, with Hedevar, not surprising. And then they gave him Horse of the Year, and but then he came back in the Suburban the next year without Hedevar, and he got beat.
You know, it's interesting. You know, noteworthy right off the top is that you know, the Woodward at Aqueduct is the race of the century in Sports Illustrated. I don't think we can get Sports Illustrated to cover the Woodward now if we paid them to come do it.
Actually, no, you couldn't. But this was it. This was the Sports Illustrated. So
Right.
This is Horse of the Year, you know, and there was a big story, lots of pictures with those two pictures in there. So and I'm looking for another picture here. I don't think I'm going to find it. So with being a kid, to make $100 to take a picture, you know, obviously Tony Triolo got the credit, but you know, he was very good. You know, he said he was going to send me 2 laminated pictures from Sports Illustrated. I'm looking as I'm talking, and I can't find it. Hold on.
He should have given you the credit for that.
No,
my opinion.
All I did was click, but
That's all he does is click. That's all any photographer does is click at the right time. You deserve the credit. You're the guy that clicked.
And I sent you the picture that I took turning for home.
Right.
I want to see if I can find it. So everybody bear with me because now I'm on my main computer. And I don't want to waste time, but I think I know where it is. The picture that quote unquote I took, you know, was a classic. There's Buckpasser, Damascus, and Dr. Fager all in a row. That's when the race unfolded. I'm looking here. Here it is. Here it is. I'm going to move this. I'm going to see if I can take this picture with the camera. I'm doing everything here. I've become since I've been doing this with you, I've become a little, I don't know. Can you see that?
It's small, but we could see it. But I'll get it posted up there. No worries.
Okay. I mean, that is
Yeah.
just a classic picture with 3 great horses. And you know what? They were great horses. The word great horse is thrown around so loosely these days. Everybody's a great horse. No, they weren't. You know, these were great horses, and this was really the heart of the golden age of racing. You know, and this race, you know, was the race of not only the century, but of the golden age of racing.
Well, in today's sport, Ray, the odds of getting 3 horses of the year in the gate together is almost impossible. I mean, in today's optic, I don't see how it could possibly happen.
A horse becomes Horse of the Year. He's not going to run next year, most likely.
Correct.
certainly not going to run in 2 years. So as I go back on my trusty phone, there's a picture I want to show you. This was the same day. This was 2 races. Can you see that?
I could see it.
2 races after the race of the century, and the kid on the side holding the bell and howl is me. Never got to use it because I took the picture. But that horse, Swing Rex, there's a little side story to this.
I think I know it. He used to win the last race every week.
He was claimed by Pancho. He ran 9 Saturdays in a row. He won the 9th race, and it was starters handicap, and they kept adding weight to him. How we got from the race to the century to this, but that was 2 races later, and they kept adding weight. Tommy Trotter kept adding weight, and he was well into the 130s. And it wasn't Bill Gallo. It was another Daily News artist, cartoonist. And there was a picture of a horse, broke down horse pulling a wagon. And then Tommy Trotter was the guy driving with a whip. And it said, Tommy Trotter is going to get, arrested for cruelty to animals. He was putting so much weight on Swing Rex. But that was, the race of the century. But Swing Rex kind of was like the $2 better, the real staple racing fan. They knew him, for 9 weeks, and every week was, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, up for 9 straight, weeks. He won the 9th race in New York with a lot of weight. So that was the day. Never got the pictures of the video of. I probably would have lost it by now, of the race of the century. But I got the ones from Sports Illustrated that mean a lot more to me. But another funny side note is that, I told you I loved Dr. Fager and I loved the Buckpasser, and I didn't like Damascus. God forgive me for all the Damascus fans. And ironically, this was in September of '67. In the summer of '69, I had to work as a requirement for Cornell on a farm for the summer. And most kids worked on a dairy farm. I wasn't going to work on a dairy farm. So I asked my advisor if it would be okay to work on a horse farm. And he said, okay. And there was a horse farm out on Long Island. It was Tally Ho Farm, owned by Michael Ricardo. I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
David Jacob.
Well, I remember Tally Ho Farm. So.
Right. And then Morton Bin bought the farm, and it became Binmore. Right. And now the was sold. And if you drive by there now, there's a whole bunch of very high-end homes because it's in a very exclusive area on the Gold Coast, the North Shore of Long Island. And I said to myself, I didn't want to, if I was going to do it, I was going to do it. With all due respect to Tally Ho Farm, I said I really should maybe try to work on Claiborne Farm. That was the farm. So one morning after work in April of 1969, because I worked in the summer of '69, I left Pancho's barn. I went to see Lucian Lauren, and he knew me from around, but he didn't know me. I think he must have known that I was Pancho's boy. But I said, Mr. Lauren, I got to work on a farm this summer. And I was wondering if you could help me get a job on Claiborne Farm. And he said, I'll tell you what, come back on Saturday about this time, and Mr. Hancock will be here. Because they were running Dyke in the Wood Memorial in April of '69. And he was going to be there for the race and at the barn in the morning. And sure enough, I went back the Saturday of the 1969 Wood Memorial. And there in the little field where you see a lot of pictures of Secretariat a few years later were taken, there's a little Lucian Lauren and a big guy, and with that old-fashioned hat, Stetson, I don't know, it wasn't a cowboy hat, was Bull Hancock, and I went up to Lucian Lauren, and he said, Lucian said to Bull Hancock, this is, he didn't even know, remember, this is Raymond, and he wanted to ask you a question. And I said, Mr. Hancock, for a school requirement, I need to work on a farm this summer. Might you have a position for me on Claiborne Farm? And I mean, this is and he just became a pillar of racing at the museum a few years ago. This was one of the bigs of horse racing, you know, Bull Hancock. And very, very nicely, he said, I'm going to give you a phone number. Took out a piece of paper and a pen, and he wrote down the name John Sosby, who ended up as the manager of Claiborne, but at the time he was the yearling manager. And he said, you call him and you tell him that you spoke with Mr. Hancock and to give you a job this summer and to set up, you know, a room for you, you know, where you could live, and he'll take care of all the arrangements. He said, does that help you? I said, oh, you have no idea, you know, thank you so much. And then as a kid, this is almost as good as signing autographs. I had the nerve, which I wouldn't do now, but I said, do you think I could bring my cousin with me too? You know, can you give him a job? I mean, you talk about nerve. He just gave me a job. I should have been grateful. And he said, sure. And my cousin, you know, trained Van Dania, trained a little bit, Michael Stango. He started working with Murdy after I left in the vanning business, and now he's with Alex Nichols, and, you know, he's still on the track, but that was his introduction to horse racing.
That's
so
pretty cool.
He came down, he worked with yearlings on a different farm. There was Raceland, which is now owned by, I believe, Hillendale. I worked on the main farm. And very ironically, you know, we'd come in, first thing we do is we clean the stalls. Then we'd go out in the field because the yearlings were out all night, bring them in, feed them. And there was a young guy who cleaned the stalls next to me, you know, for a week or two. I didn't know who it was. And then somebody said to me, do you know who that is cleaning the stalls next to you, that young man who was actually my age? Obviously still is. And I said, no. He said, that's Seth Hancock. That's Bull Hancock's son. So there's the future president and the owner of Claiborne Farm. But Mr. Hancock had him out there cleaning stalls with the rest of us. No breaks, no, you know, less work. He worked just as hard as all of us. And that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And ironically, everything is ironic. I guess that's the story of these podcasts, you know, just happening to be in the right place at the right. We went over one day to the stallion section. I didn't work with the stallions. And this was 2 years, less than 2 years after the race of the century. And I was reunited with my old buddy, Damascus. Can you see that?
Yes.
You know, they took him out, and I got to see Damascus. Whether he remembered me as the kid from Belmont, I don't know. And this is funny. I finally met my nemesis, Damascus. Dr. Fager wasn't there. He was in Ocala.
Yeah, so the first horse you met, you were reunited with Buckpasser.
Yeah,
right.
But yes, but Damascus was there. And I said, I might as well meet him, you know, and they took Damascus out, and that's Damascus at Claiborne. And then just for grins, here's Sir Gaylord, half brother to Secretariat.
Right.
He was a very good sire. Here's Tom Ralph, great grass sire, sire of Chuvy, great grass sire. And one more, let's see. I won't bore you guys too much. There was one more very interesting one. There's Bo Rula, not long before he died, with
wow.
myself, my younger brother, And the story behind this picture was maybe 3 months, 4 months before this photo was taken, he bred a mare called Something Royal.
Ah, that was a pretty famous baby.
And 4 months after that picture was taken, there was a mare back in Virginia who was in foal carrying Secretariat. So that was 4 months after that match.
And here, let's just tie all of that together. There you are with Bold Ruler. After he mated with Something Royal, which would produce Secretariat. And on a previous show, you showed us race-worn hair that you still have.
No, that's gone. Finally gone.
You have the little piece. You have a little piece.
Oh, there it is.
Right. Race-worn hair from Secretariat. So that's a full circle if we've ever saw one. But I want to ask you something. As somebody who's been around,
half brother to Secretariat.
Yes, been around horses your entire life, okay, in all different capacities, had relationships with horses. One of the shows we're going to do is about Ruffian and her final hours when you were there with her, which is an amazing, very sad but amazing story. But you've been around horses and interacted with them on all different levels. And you said something before that I want to explore a little bit because I find it interesting. You know, I'm an animal lover myself, but I don't have near the experience with horses that you have. But I work with animals that have been abused and try and, you know, get them comfortable with people again and stuff like that. But
and kudos to you. I give you a world of credit.
You said something before that spiked my interest because it's something that I wonder about and I have thoughts about. You said that you reunited with Buckpasser after all those years, which was not a lot of years, a couple of years, 3 years. And did he know you were the kid from Belmont? You don't know. Okay. What's your gut instinct on something like that? Because I've heard riders like Mike Smith say that he's gone to see Zenyatta and he felt she remembered him. I've heard Gary Stevens say that he's gone to see Silver Charm and he felt like he remembered him. What's your gut feeling about that, about racehorses? How much do they get to know people, like people? And if you had a bet on it, and I know you're not a gambler, but if you had a bet, did Buckpasser know you were the kid from Belmont Park?
Okay, now you got to understand this. Mike Smith rode and had a real relationship with Zenyatta and Gary Stevens with Silver Charm.
Right.
I never really worked with Buckpasser, never got in the stall, never walked him like I did Slew of Gold or Dahlia. You know, Dahlia may have remembered me at the starting gate when she came back 2 years later for the Man of War. If I was able to stop her before the race and say, Dahlia, it's me.
Right.
She connected with this guy now working on the start, maybe. But my experience with Buckpasser were very few, you know, from outside the stall, just petting him on the forehead for a few minutes and leaving. No real interaction. The same with Damascus. The most I ever did was pat him on the top of his head and gawk at him. The same with Secretariat in the van, you know, the 5 minutes when I pulled his hair. So no, I was kind of kidding. He might remember that because you pulled his hair. Say yeah, right. He a Buckpasser.
He might remember that's the guy pulled my hair.
Now let me turn around and kick him. But Buckpasser, for me, no. You know, maybe a groom that he had for 4 years, yes. Dahlia, maybe yes, as I said. Damascus, for me, no.
Okay,
no.
So then you personally know because you didn't have that kind of relationship with those horses. But your answer would be that horses do get to know people that they have relationships and interactions with and remember them and interact with them and get to know them.
I've heard stories about these rehab farms where with prisoners, and there's a prisoner who gets really attached to a horse and spends 2 or 3 years with him every day, rubbing him, talking to him, petting him. Well, not just a prisoner, just people working on farm. And then the prisoner is released, then comes back and sees that horse. That horse remembers him.
Right.
Buckpasser, Secretariat, Dr. Fager, not going to remember me. Dahlia, maybe. Certainly not Ruffian, because the only time I met her, she wasn't thinking straight, and it was only for 4 or 5 hours. So the answer to your question is yes, but in my case, no.
Right.
That
Interesting though. Yeah, no, and that's probably the right answer and a good answer. But it's something I've always wondered about, because it's sometimes hard to tell with animals. Sometimes we think they know things that they don't, and sometimes they know things that we don't think they do. So
I think
it's
dogs are more. See a guy go, overseas for a couple of years and come back, and his dog sees him and goes crazy. His dog knows, or dog is lost for 5 years, 6 years, somehow reunited with the family. They know. I think dogs, God forgive me, horse fans, I think dogs are just, can I say dogs are smarter without people getting mad? Maybe.
I would think that that's a reasonable statement, and I don't think that many people that have been around a lot of animals, especially racehorses and dogs, would argue that point. And dogs have different kind of instincts and senses that racehorses don't have. And I'll give you an example, not to bore anybody, but I had a Yorkie for many years, Chanel. Okay, and when I used to go to the racetrack every day, I used to take her to what I call doggy daycare. It really wasn't a doggy daycare. I turned my vet's office into a doggy daycare. They all knew me there, and they liked me. And I would take her there, and I would drop her off, and they would leave her behind the counter with the girls working. And she was very safe back there, and they all knew her. And she would stay there all day, and she was the belle of the ball. And I would pay them to do this, and I would go to the racetrack because I didn't want to leave her at home every day. And on my way back from the races, I would stop, pick her up, and take her home. And I was very erratic schedule-wise. I could be back to pick her up anywhere from 5 o'clock to 7 or 7:30. Okay, you never knew what time.
Out, you were back earlier.
Right, you would never know what time I was going to be back. So one day, I walked in, and they had her ready to go, hand off to me, up on top of the counter, playing with her. And I walked in, and just casually, without thinking, I said, "Oh, you had her all ready for me." They said, "Like, well, yeah, we knew you were coming." I said, "How'd you know I was coming?" They said, "Oh, we always know about 5 minutes before you get here." I said, "How?" They said, "Oh, she tells us." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It makes no sense." I said, "No, whatever time you're coming, 5 minutes before you come, she starts running around in circles, barking, staring at the door. Every time the door opens, she's yep, 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 yep. Whether it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 7:30, 5 minutes before you come, she goes on alert, goes crazy, won't stop barking, and we absolutely know you're 5 minutes away." I'm like, "That's amazing. How is that possible?" Like,
I believe it.
She was like, "We don't know." And the vet even came out and said, "Listen," he goes, "we don't know how she knows, but she knows you're coming. We know about 5 minutes before you get here. We know that, you're on your way." And I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing." So somehow she sensed when I was coming.
And not to bore you very quickly, we have the 2 rescues. The one that was abused with one eye, he sits on the seat. He's small. He never looks out the window. But when he's in the car, he knows when I'm 1 block from my house. He'll get up and he'll start turning around in his seat. How he knows, he can't even see, and he can't see out the window, but he knows we're home. So I think, do horses have a sixth sense? I remember once walking a horse in Pancho's barn, and on the other side, outside, they had just put a horse to sleep. So there was a horse that couldn't be seen, but he was laying on the other side of the barn, outside, laying there. And that horse really didn't want to walk by that spot. How he knew, we didn't see someone just said, "Yeah, they just put so-and-so out." Okay. And I knew he was out there, but the horse knew he was out there. I think horses are smart. I think dogs are smarter. But I want to end on this because I know we're going over. I want to talk. We had Secretariat, we had Affirmed, we had Seattle Slew, we had Buckpasser, we had Damascus, we had Dr. Fager. The only one who his sire line continued was Seattle Slew. Affirmed sire line is dead. His sons, whatever, he wasn't a good sire of sires, was a great broodmare sire. Damascus, for some reason, Damascus's sons did well in Argentina, but here, Norcliffe or whatever, so the Damascus sire line is dead, okay? But he was a great broodmare sire. No, Buckpasser, I'm talking about being with his stallions in Argentina. Buckpasser, Norcliffe, his sons were never really much at stud, but his daughters were unbelievable. Affirmed, we did affirmed. Seattle Slew basically was a dud, you know. He really, you know, what's the horse? The tin something. I don't. He didn't really. Lady's Secret was a good one, but for the quality.
You're talking about Secretariat. You're talking about Secretariat.
Secretariat. I'm all over the place today.
Right. He had. I think his best son was probably General Assembly. No.
But who didn't become a sire. So right. Secretariat was not, you know, that great a sire, but his daughters were great broodmares. All these horses, great horses that should have been sires of sires, and their sire lines should be continuing. They didn't. They continued through the mares. The only one.
And that's a show we should do a show on that and just explore that in detail down the road. But we'll come back.
Fager too. Not a sire of sires, great broodmare sire. The only one, Seattle Slew, his son's sire, and AP Indy. Now the branch really expands. You've got Tappet, you've got all those horses. You know, Seattle Slew is a great broodmare sire.
And here's what I want to throw into that mix, because I love this part of the game. Okay, Sport of Kings, $1 in a Dream, right? Who would have been the cheapest of those horses to buy?
Seattle Slew.
Seattle Slew. What was it? 17,000, right?
18,000.
Right. And he's the one that turned out to have a sire line that's still going today with AP Indy and others. You know what I mean? And the rest, like you said, you know.
And his daughters, even though now they're getting older, his daughters were great. But Dr. Fager, you would think, you know, great broodmare sire, he wasn't a sire. So all those sire lines, Secretariat, Affirmed, Damascus, Buckpasser, they've all, they died. You know, Seattle Slew is flourishing. So next week, I know we went way over time.
And next week, listen, I'm gonna interject on the schedule a little bit. Okay. Next week, I really want to do Ruffian.
Okay.
I really want to do Ruffian. I know there's a lot of people that want to hear it.
Okay.
It's as poignant a story as there is out there.
Yes.
Nobody can tell it like you can, because you were there. I mean, people are going to hear what really happened in the recovery room and when she was euthanized, and I think it's something that the sport deserves. We wrote that article together and a lot of people read it. Hundreds of thousands of people read it, which is phenomenal. But it's different hearing it. It's different hearing it from the guy that was there and held her. And a lot of people really want to hear it. And the industry deserves to hear what really happened from the guy that was there.
There was a lot written, documentaries. We won't mention any names. People who weren't there at all, who weren't born or dead now. And everybody had their own spin on it. And it used to drive me crazy. And you said, well, let's do a story. And I didn't want to. And then finally, I guess I saw one documentary too much, or saw one guy talking too much. And I said, okay, we'll do it. Because nobody really got the last 5 hours right, you know.
Nobody. And so many people added little spins and innuendos and this and that. And unfortunately, before we ever did that book, all of those things kind of became the story and racing history. And it's just not accurate. You know what I mean?
And the grooms were there saying, look, she's still running. She's running to heaven. Oh, my God. And as you said, and as I said, and we'll end it here, if everybody who said they were in the operating room, not the recovery room, which was smaller, which was just Dr. Prendergast and myself, in the operating room, you would have needed Chase Stadium.
Right, but would have had to have the operation in Chase Stadium, right? It was ridiculous.
But we'll do that next week. But I want you to remember, I want to just talk at some point about Dr. Fager's 4-year-old career in 1968, in which he won Horse of the Year, Champion Sprinter, Champion Grass Horse, and Champion Older Horse. That's like Joe DiMaggio's 56. It will never be done again.
Right.
The weight he carried, the horses he beat, you know, the illnesses, and the 2 world record in Washington, a mile that stood for years. And when he won this last race,
I think the internal fractions of that mile are still the fastest ever. But go ahead.
It up, but Artax tied, I think, will beat his Vosburg record 31 years later, and Najran, I believe, tied or beat his mile record. But his times were in fifths, like and 120.04. Maybe Dr. Fager ran 120.03, but it was a fifth. We don't know. So in my opinion, he's still got a little bit of connection with those world records that stood forever. And the Vosburg was with 139 pounds. The night before, Nehru almost scratched him because he was sick. End of story. I could go on forever. Ruffian next week. And good luck with your new dog. Jonathan just rescued a new dog that had been a 10-year with some people and was abandoned. And that dog knows he was abandoned.
Oh yeah, he's heartbroken. You can tell. He's very, very sad. But we got him coming around. He's coming around. He wags his tail when I look at him, and I talk to him, and he's really coming around, and we're integrating him with the rest of the pack over here. So he's going to be fine.
They're going to accept because he's so small. You got some monsters there.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm fortunate with my dogs. They're used to us doing rescues, and they're used to us doing fosters and rehabilitation. So they're used to other dogs. And you know, my 2 big guys, you know, Drago and Mac, are such alphas and so big and strong and powerful, and they're guard dogs and all of that. But when I tell them, hey, listen, you watch out for this guy's part of us, you know what I mean? And that's all I really got to do, and just bring him over and introduce him. Then they kind of just know to guard that dog, you know what I mean? And they protect them. If anything, it would be an accident because they run through the backyard and the house like freight trains, and he's 4 pounds. So I got to, you know, watch, you know, make sure that they're careful in that way. But other than that, no, they're very accepting, and they already know that.
About the there you go. They know. These 2 rescues here, one is bigger than the little guy with one eye, and they play, but he knows he's limited as to, he could play a lot rougher.
Right.
But he knows the little guy has been abused, has some head problems, but one eye, and he plays with him on his level. It's wonderful to see. End of story. Ruffian next week. But then we get back to Damascus. You got to give me 20 minutes for Damascus.
No worries. Yeah. No, Dr. Fager, you keep getting confused.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry. I told you.
You need me. It's all right. You need me. I got you. Don't worry about it. Dr. Fager and that incredible campaign after Ruffian next week.
1968. Thank you very much. Sorry for all the Damascus and Buckpasser and Dr. Fager confusion. You know, they kind of all blend into one at a certain age. You know,
Ray, listen, Ray. We're getting old. What are you going to do? We're getting old, both of us. It happens. The other day, I was watching on TV. I saw a commercial with Mark Spitz. Remember Mark? Scared me. I was like, that's Mark Spitz. Do we look like that when people see us now? I think so.
He looks like a librarian.
I couldn't believe it.
Great body, he was fit. He looked older than we do, believe me.
I hope so. I don't think so. I think we see ourselves different, and people see us like we saw him. That's what I'm afraid of.
So then starting next week, we can do this with a blank screen. you know,
Maybe.
or a picture of when I was 21 and a picture of you.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. We'll put up 2 pictures of when we were young, like they do on the dating sites. You know what I mean? Put up like pictures of like 20 years ago.
Okay. So goodbye,
All
Pete.
right.
This is me. Next week you'll see Jerry Grody.
All right. Ciao for now.
All right, Jonathan. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for the corrections. I needed them.
That sounded good. I think that went well.
I'm amazed that
Nobody does it better.